Hi, I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and we're here at FedTalks with Brent Schroder, Chief Technology Officer at SUSE. Brent, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So let me start with the question of how have you seen technology in the federal government play a critical role in 2020 in response to the unprecedented pandemic that has rocked our nation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And technology really had to come in very quickly because there really wasn't any warning or ramp up opportunity there. I think the first one that's probably the most visible is the whole notion of teleworking and the virtual work from home atmosphere. A lot of technology came to bear to make that work. Significant technology improvements that we would see kind of on a week-to-week basis as the industry responded and companies responded and how they were adapting. So that's probably the first and foremost one in making that happen. And as that occurred, then a lot of different infrastructure elements needed to come into play to make that work and to sustain that as it grew in the areas of security. It's virtual private networks and how the networking infrastructure worked, securing the communications, and then securing the infrastructure and making sure that that was readily available but not open to the outside world or those that didn't want to have or you didn't want to have access to it. So those are probably a couple of the key areas that I saw.
Well, how can the federal government potentially leapfrog ahead in using modern and emerging technologies like cloud and AI and automation that they've been putting to use?
Yeah, no, I think there's a great synergy, or maybe we call it momentum, that's been built up because so many agencies had to respond so quickly. I've seen a lot of kind of, let's call it almost proof of concept adoption of we got to try something. The way that we've been doing it won't work to tackle this problem in the time frame that we've got to tackle it. And so, that's been a very rapid response in trying integration across different data streams, AI technologies being applied to problems, etc. So if I then step back and kind of take the lessons learned, or what can we take away from that, to make a leapfrog, what I would first say is let's not make it a monolithic leap. If we try to look at the whole of all technology available and want to modernize it as a all at once, then it becomes an overwhelming, intractable problem. And I think what the pandemic has showed us is we take the technology and apply it to problems, very almost laser focused on one. The ramp up time is much quicker and the time to value is much quicker. So I'd say breaking down this multifaceted challenge in kind of learning in parallel, both at the infrastructure level, we need to do infrastructure modernization, if you will, adopting cloud technology. Don't make it an all or nothing cloud, but on a project by project, opportunity by opportunity, modernize that infrastructure, bring it up to date, introduce AI technology into the infrastructure. And then second, how do we deliver applications? The old waterfall method really needs to go by the wayside now and adopt the technologies that are really maturing for continuous integration, continuous development, really bringing agile all the way to its full implementation. So starting from greenfield projects, start small, rapidly iterate to build on that, and I think that's the best way that the government as a whole can really take a major leap in that.
Well, next, I'd like to ask, how are you seeing the federal government working in new and creative ways to bring talented technologists into its workforce?
That's I think a challenge even much beyond the federal government. And I think the industry as a whole is really challenged with a shortage of resources, skilled in some of these new technologies, whether it's AI, whether it's, cloud native computing, hybrid clouds, et cetera, just across the board. And so everybody's competing for a limited set of resources. And that's where I think we've got to think about new ways to get more out of the resources we have, and also to train people that are certainly very talented and experts on, say, the previous generation of technology, and bring them forward. So, I see technologists, they want to work on interesting and challenging problems. And so it's not always the highest bidder, but there needs to be an awareness of where is it exciting to work? Is it exciting to work on federal government projects? Creating that interest and excitement around that, and awareness of that. And I think there's a couple of different approaches to do that, just in addition to advertising or recruiting. First would be partnering, with the private sector. And I think that collaboration with the private sector, and maybe where there is a higher concentration of technologists, creates awareness. When the teams work together or solve a problem together, they're people talk, they experience, hey, this is a really exciting project that's being worked on. I want to get in the middle of this. I want to get involved with it. And so it creates that opportunity with that collaboration. And, I've seen some examples of that with, if we go back to, the 2020, I think there we've also seen, again, not only an unprecedented challenge, but probably unprecedented collaboration at the highest level since possibly World War II. In supply chain management, for example, ventilators and shortages in personal protective equipment, et cetera, and how do we get that into the right place? And that, really required, unprecedented levels of collaboration with private sectors and the federal government. And I think doing more of that is a way to create awareness that, there's exciting things happening in the government that people want to work on. And I think that would help attract a bigger pool to work from.
Kind of a wrap up. In your role as Chief Technology Officer, what other trends or priorities do you have on your radar as we head into 2021?
Yeah, what I think is really going to be a 2021 isn't so much about new technologies, but these ones that we've been incubating or that the early adopters have been tackling that are now going to really hit an inflection point. We've been seeing growing adoption of, say, containers and cloud native computing, of AI, of flagship projects that might stand out. And I think the biggest thing we're going to see this year from a technology radar is the ramp up of that. And companies, such as SUSE, and what we're really trying to do to facilitate that is simplify adoption. Adoption of for both operations sides and adoption for developers alike. Going back to the skills shortage, we need to really accelerate and put focus on how to make the newer technologies not more complex because they can do more, but easier to adopt while accomplishing more. And so I think that's the first and foremost thing that you will see is a simplification of these emerging technologies to accelerate adoption. And then those use cases scaling. You can find a lot of use cases where somebody did AI or cloud native computing or microservices at a moderate scale, per se. And I think we're going to see those projects scale, such as in edge computing, from where I may have tens or hundreds of edge sites to field deployments. And, for example, in a DoD deployment where I've got to deploy edge all over, and it's got to be very, I want to deploy it globally, and it's got to be able to move fast. And it's not counted in hundreds or thousands, but in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of edge deployments, and be able to manage those globally. So those are probably two of the bigger ones that I see as real focal points of maturing the technologies we have. As maybe other new incubating technologies start to mature or come into play. But those are the two biggest trends that I'm looking forward to in 2021.
Well, those will certainly be ones we'll all want to watch. Brent Schroder, thank you so much for stopping by here at Fed Talks and sharing some of your insights with us.
Absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Have a great weekend.